Live.
Oh, no.
We're live.
There we go.
All right, so
Ryan, are you going to be our master of ceremonies, make everything happen?
I guess I'm the master of ceremonies. That's
The man of the hour.
probably a very bad idea. But we got Google Hangouts working, so that's always a good start. Seeing how like every podcast and live talk seems to just completely mess that up. We've gotten it within the first 3 minutes, so that's a win so far. So I guess let's go around to start off and like kind of talk about where you guys have like experienced CMSs before, and just like really quick, like 1 minute or so. So I guess
sweet, I'll start. So like you want the background of like even where we started at and stuff.
yeah.
So obviously I think I started out like everybody else, doing static, hated static, went to WordPress, hated WordPress, headed on over to Expression Engine, started doing a little bit of add-on development for Expression Engine, but really not much though. And that was kind of when I started poking around with Kirby, a lot of the flat file stuff, so even stuff like Wardrobe CMS and seeing stuff like that. Typically just because I wanted to do a lot of like writing posts, like the art director post that got really big. So I don't know if you guys ever knew who was it Visual Idiot or something like that. He had his own little flat file. Well, that actually wasn't flat file, but the CMS I was going. And then I found Craft, and I've been on Craft kick, and I doubt anytime soon I'll be getting off the Craft kick. So I've kicked Expression Engine just because I don't have to support anybody on Expression Engine. Most clients and stuff come to us with no existing or something like WordPress, and so I help them get off WordPress pretty easily. So that's kind of my background.
Cool. So I guess Alex or Matt?
Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll go. So my background is really on the sort of marketing agency side. I've done a lot of development for projects for rather large companies over here in the UK who they want content management, but they also want custom applications that go around it. So it's a bit more than just sort of editing a page or being able to control, a blog or a post or a theme or things like that. So my experience has largely been around a proprietary CMS that I built in a previous company, which had its foundations around some of the stuff that's in sort of Easy Publish and Drupal, sort of quite big, beastie kind of horrible systems. I've used WordPress quite a bit, which is great, gets customers up and running, gets them being able to edit stuff, pretty easy user interface. Kind of got to the point now where I've done a bit of, in the last 6 to 12 months, a lot of the development I've been has been custom applications and APIs, and I've used Laravel for that. I've then come onto a couple of projects recently in the last couple of months where I've wanted to use a CMS platform, but there isn't one out there using Laravel, which is what I'm now familiar with. First and foremost, I like the sort of class-based IOC sort of approach, the Blade templating language, all of those things that I want when I'm actually developing a CMS aren't necessarily out there anymore. So I made the decision about 6 weeks ago to actually just start building my own one for the purposes of a project that I've got to deliver on in the next 6 weeks. So I figured, what the hell, let's just actually develop my own one and hopefully give it back to the community. So that's where I'm coming from.
That's cool. And then I guess Max, where you're...
Real quick, Ryan, we got a comment saying that that's big screen stuck on my face. So if you could do something.
Big screen stuck on Matt 100% of the time.
I mean, I know I'm really good looking and everything, but...
I think it may have been because I had you clicked. I'm not completely sure. So that's...
Actually,
I think that might fix it.
They'll let us know.
Yeah, and does anyone know, I guess, how to do the Q&A? It says turn off the feature on the Google event page. Oh, before the podcast. So I guess no Q&A, but I guess just post it on the chat, and I'll have that open, or one of us will have that open. So Max, I guess a little bit of background from where you came from, I guess.
Sure. Well, I started with WordPress, probably like a lot of PHP developers a long time ago. You know, just doing some work for clients from small to big, and my own websites on WordPress. So over the time, though, when I found Laravel, that was basically I thought that's the way to go with custom-built CMSs. So all of my websites right now, probably like 80% of them are just CMSs from scratch that are all done with Laravel. For example, Bootsnip is a CMS. You know, the built-with-Laravel.com website is a custom CMS. LaravelTricks.com is also a CMS. So all of them are very specialized, very targeted, and
Right.
so there's no other clients, you know, trying to tell me what to do. So for now, they're all just custom built from scratch and very specialized. So that's what I do these days.
Yeah, cool. So I guess I came kind of similar to what you guys were at. I started out just did a WordPress blog. A bunch of people started asking me that. Got my first job at an ad agency, and that ad agency started out just doing band sites and all that, which it worked out fine. There was a lot of static content that I wish I could have just done straight HTML, and that would have been a lot easier because they never had changing content, and they ended up messing up the CMS more than anything. And then kind of where I jumped out of CMSs, and I say that I rage quit on CMSs, is we had one client that wanted to build like an entire social network on top of WordPress, and that wasn't the client's decision, that was my boss's decision. So I quickly rage quit not only the job, but also working with any CMSs ever again, at least for a while. And then from there, decided I had a startup called iOffatory and wanted to do like a blog of updates on features and stuff. So saw what Eric Barnes was doing with Wardrobe, jumped in on that, and then I went ahead and helped him build that as kind of an installable package for Composer. And then that's kind of where I'm at now. And now I'm working at a different company, and we kind of use like a starter package that's a little uncomfortable to use. It throws you into some pretty hard conventions with Laravel, and can make things a little bit sticky. And like it gets you started really quick, but then doesn't give you many tools to do content management after that. So that's kind of where we're at.
Cool. From my background, I've done my WordPress, done my expression engine, built a few custom CMSs in CodeIgniter, and we're actually also maintaining a pretty massive old CodeIgniter CMS, which is the whole, like, we wish we could do it with something else, but there's nothing that was flexible enough to hook in the type of external APIs and custom data wrangling that we needed. So the only way was to build it, and CodeIgniter was the big dog back then. So we're still maintaining that, slowly slipping in Illuminate components and stuff like that. We do build some kind of API backends, and again, we almost always just end up building them in Laravel. One of them we maintain is in Rails. And we just have started toying around with doing stuff in Craft. We met the Craft guys last week at PeersConf. I'm really impressed with the code base. I mean, it's not Laravel, but Yi is very Laravel-like, very modern, really good to work with. And the guys are just really fantastic to interact with, and really responsive and everything. So I'm actually working with a guy from HappyCog, Anthony Colangelo, to work through some ideas about what it looks like to build more custom stuff, like something they did at HappyCog with MPV. Build more custom front ends and Laravel-based front ends and a couple other things, using Craft as kind of the core CMS to power it. So we do a lot of custom stuff, but we're definitely kind of moving in the Craft direction at least. So.
Cool. So I guess we all kind of came. It sounds like we all kind of came from WordPress, and I mean, I know for me, one of the biggest hang-ups with WordPress was that it kind of forced you into always having to have their set types of content, and that was really awkward because, like I said, we had people that only had pages. We had other people that only had a blog, so we ended up using Tumblr a lot because it was just easier to manage content. We could do static sometimes and not. But what's kind of your hang-ups that made you outgrow WordPress really quickly, I guess, as a CMS? Because that's the first one that always comes up.
I think for me, WordPress, the biggest issue has always been the fact that you feel like you're always fighting against the underlying code. So if you want to do anything custom, normally you can achieve it, but to achieve it, you're having to add in numerous hooks in numerous places, hack certain elements of code, try to override this, try to put this in place. So you end up just going through this spiral of disgustingness to try and achieve something that's relatively simple. I think the most recent thing I did in WordPress was, I ended up creating like a views file where I could have a big massive switch statement, which was all of the different views trying to pick up off different URLs. But then if I wanted to actually handle the posted data, then that would have to be in a different place, and I'd have to try and set it in the session and then try and pick it up later. It just turns into this disgusting mess, and things that should be relatively simple and straightforward that you just want to get done turn into the hard stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the architecture of WordPress in general is extremely limiting. I mean, when we're talking about what it's going to let you do, especially as a lot of things we're talking about here are connecting to more complicated APIs or third-party things or whatever. I mean, everything that's moving forward in PHP is object-oriented, composer-related, PSRs, all kind of stuff, and WordPress is pretty much the perfect example of how to do PHP poorly and get mocked by Ruby devs. So there's not really a lot of like future friendliness or horizontal flexibility, code reuse, anything like that.
Yeah, that was one of my always things too. Is coming from the front end of the world of not really caring much about the back end, not too much, but it was always like clients always had a specific type of content they were going to be putting in. And looking at it going, okay, well, we have posts and pages, and then going, okay, well, let's start with custom post types. I remember the first time I did custom post types, I remember looking at the amount of code just to get a single type of content like registered of where you can actually just post something, and I was like, that's ridiculous. Whereas like looking at Expression Engine where it was kind of set up like in this like bucket fashion where it didn't really care the type of content. You just told it what it was going to be, the fields that you needed. That's why I'm really enjoying Craft now. Is it just kind of started out with WordPress being like, okay, well, I got to write all this code for just this thing. Now I got to write it again, and now I got to write it again. Now I got to write it again. Now you can kind of extract that in different things where you can just have it kind of automate it for you. That still didn't make sense to me. It's like I shouldn't be doing that. The framework itself should be doing that for me and allowing me to just focus on the type of content that's putting into it. So like going into Craft now, it's like, okay, what types of content do I need? Well, it's going to be a blog. There's going to be this, and it's like all I need to do is just tell it. These are the things that I needed to have, and I think that was the major thing for me. And also is like a lot of the fields and stuff. Did you guys ever do a lot of that like the meta fields and all that kind of stuff for WordPress and then for the first time ever seeing like ACF and then being like, oh my God, you can actually do some cool things with ACF. Like that's cool. I can do all this conditional stuff. That's rad. But still doing that, it gets confusing really fast. As like the more complex you make it, it just kind of triples in complexity when you're still trying to just add a little bit of functionality into it. I think that killed it for me is knowing that having to do so much myself instead of the framework doing much of it for you. I think that's where a lot of the other ones kind of take WordPress over is they do a lot of this stuff for you where it just kind of makes sense to do it automatically. So I think that's where it kind of fails for me.
I think for me, custom post types was kind of the breakdown of everything because I just felt like a lot of the sites that I was doing back at the ad agency we started with a theme, and if you've dealt with any of the more complex themes with WordPress, you find that if you try to change anything, they will most definitely break if they weren't already broken already. So that was one of the things is like you would try to do, I remember it was like a gallery that I was doing for an artist, and there was a custom post type for a photo, but some dependency that it had that it wasn't managing properly just completely was broken, and the custom post type was just a mess, and there was just sloppy, very functional code, and not functional programming in the good way. It was just all inline. Do this, then that, then that, then that, and there's no objects or anything to delegate things. And I know, talking to a lot of some of the better WordPress developers out there, that you can object-orient things, but it's kind of a hack to try to get like object-oriented stuff or like Composer. Like there was a post I think I saw about a month back about like, oh, don't give up on WordPress yet. You can still use Composer, and it was such a hack. You had to make a theme that like included this one file, and
the idea of Composer in WordPress scares me quite a lot. Actually.
Yeah, and I think
the post types in WordPress were certainly something that helped me out, because one of the things that I seem to come up against a lot is the idea of different types of content, which is something that I've tried to address in my own development. Is, it's all well and good to have a blog or a page or a comment, but in a lot of the big sites that you're dealing with, it's more than that. It's news articles, it's competitions, it's events, it's galleries, it's all manner of different things, 20 plus, 30 plus different types of pages. And they're not just in one place. The clients that I'm dealing with, they're looking at, right, I want to be able to create news articles in this place and in this place, and I want to be able to add a competition over here and create an event over here. So you end up with this scattered approach, which I don't feel any of the CMSs out there necessarily address to the extent that I think they should do. If a client wants to be able to create a competition 3 levels down in a certain part of their website, they should be able to. It shouldn't just be add a new competition and that gets put on this URL that's defined by the system.
Right, and I think that's kind of the other thing, is that I still feel to an extent that WordPress has its place, and that is you've got an off-the-shelf theme, you have no idea what you're doing, and all you need is a blog, maybe some static pages, and like 1 or 2 features that you've got here or there. In the same respect, if all you need is a bunch of static pages and you don't want to have to go through doing something like Jekyll because you're not a developer, then I think it's Drupal that has like a really good navigation builder and page builder, and it's great. You don't have to worry about Composer or anything like that. And those CMSs are really good for what they're good for. But like you said, once you get into custom content types, it's a lot harder.
I should throw something out. Drupal is not fit in that space. Drupal is like way above and beyond anything we're talking about. So it's.
I can't remember if it was. Yeah, there was one framework that we were using a while back that wasn't. I say framework. That's incorrect to say framework. It was a CMS system. It was very simple. I can't remember if it was a very old version of Drupal, or if it was. I can't remember. It wasn't Drupal. It's one of the other like top 3 PHP old CMSs, and it's leaving me right now. But yeah, so if you look at page CMS, there's stuff like that. But I think we're all
there's a differentiator as well. WordPress is often used by non-developers. It's a typical sort of one-click install, buy yourself a theme, and you can start yourself a website, which is great. But once you get to a certain level of site, there's normally a developer that is responsible for that, and they need the flexibility to be able to build extra functionality into certain sections, add different page types, and that I feel that can be a developer-led thing. That should be a tricky thing to do. You should have to write some code to do that. It shouldn't just be, create a PHP file with -1 on the end of it, and that'll be picked up for this page.
It's the WordPress mentality. It's the free plugin, drag and drop. Everything works until it's updated, and then everything breaks.
Right. Brian Gallagher is in the event page, and he said it was Joomla, and that's what it was. It was an old version of Joomla that we were using, and it was great for you need to create a navigation menu that was, fit with your layout that you paid a designer for like 10 years back, and then I need to add a page because our entire staff changed. Joomla's great for that, or was great for that. I haven't messed with it in like 2 years. So.
And even on the non-dev side of stuff, too, I wanted to tap onto this, was the whole, even the templating side of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anybody really that likes to write straight PHP inside of view files. Like that's the point of templating, is like to make sure you don't have to do that kind of stuff. Because then even like once you start getting into the includes and partials and like even EE, I'm gonna jump across to all of them just because. Right.
No, that's great.
Like, jump over to EE, and then it was a brand new world when I started using that, because I was like, oh, this is rad. Now I can keep it, I can dry it up a little bit, and I have my includes that I'm putting in. And then I'm like, okay, well now I need to embed this data into this included view that I'm putting in. And I'm like, okay, well that didn't work. And then I found out about the parse order, and I go read about the parse order. I'm like, oh god, this is going to be ridiculous too now. You get over all of that, you learn about the parse order and how all that kind of stuff kind of works out. And then jumping over to Craft and going into Twig and just being like, how Twig has no parse order, and you're just like, oh, this is amazing. This is the coolest thing that I've actually worked with to date. And then just recently I found out that there actually is a Twig implementation for WordPress, which one of our sites that we're currently contractors doing, he's doing that, and he said it's been pretty easy because he has done some past WordPress stuff, and supposedly that's cleaned up a lot for him. But there is, again, it's still hackish. He still has to make some PHP files that kind of grabbing the data, and then you're actually basically including all these different files into a main index file, and then it's parsing it out for you. It kind of seems a little funky, but so I think even WordPress itself, when it comes to templating, kind of is still lacking behind a lot of the other things, because most people are going to be not super back-end developers that are going to be working with these sites once you deliver them off to clients and stuff like that. So clients can be able to pay more like a front-end developer to kind of maintain it, and those guys aren't going to be able to look at your code and be like, oh crap, they're doing this, and this. Whereas you look at the other frameworks, they can look at this code and be like, okay, for whatever, and then they'll be like, okay, well, the looping, I need to change that out. I think a lot of those other ones take the considerations for the guys that are more on the front end of stuff and not even the back end. I think that's a big plus for a lot of the other frameworks too.
Yeah, I think that's one thing to talk about, is that with the idea that either a front-end developer or designer is going to end up taking over your page, it gives you a lot of it gives you kind of this tendency to where you absolutely need to make sure you're doing as little logic in your views as possible, which is a good thing, because you shouldn't be well, this is going to hit on WordPress again, and I feel really bad because we all started there and we all pay our dues to it, but man, I just remember in every WordPress template it was like, oh, hey, I forgot to go grab this in the database, and I don't think you could even send stuff to views from the database. Like, you just had to do it programmatically, like in your view. So that's one thing, is that you have to make sure that you pass a good API of data to your templating engine, whether it's Twig, whether it's, I actually prefer raw PHP. I like to have the option to do Blade or Twig, but I really do like raw PHP just because anything else is going to end up getting compiled to it anyway, and it's relatively easy for me to read, and PHP is a templating language. So
that's a controversial statement.
Yeah, well, I think PHP can be used as a templating language. Let's put it that way.
And I think that we're talking about CMSs and kind of segmenting them against each other. I think the two most important things we've said so far are, one, is that we're not saying WordPress is bad because WordPress has its place. We're not saying Drupal's bad. Drupal has its place. And for every single developer, every single client, every single particular project, there's going to be the decision matrix of how much developer work is going to be available in the long term to maintain this versus how much is it just going to be designers and content managers. How much customization do we need? How many people we have working on it? What kind of collaboration do we need? Because handling a site for 500 people, even in something like Craft that I really like, might make me really nervous. Whereas Drupal really manages it extremely well. using Drupal for a small-scale site and having to learn all the insane complexity and set up all those rules for something where there's going to be less people managing it, just purely in the sake of like how many people manage it, that alone would already start leaning me in certain directions. So, I mean, we can definitely say that, you know, CodeIgniter's code is terrible, WordPress's code is terrible, Expression Engine's code is terrible. But even then, I would actually say we should never use CodeIgniter because you can always use Laravel for that. But like an Expression Engine and a WordPress still have some spaces where they're useful. So, yeah, I think we should acknowledge up front that like there's totally millions of different reasons why you'd want a CMS, and that's like the foundational core of making these decisions.
Yeah, I think what you just kind of hit on too is like the complexity of like how the complexity kind of builds on top of itself when you start getting into the different types of like functionality you're adding into a framework too. And I think that's where Craft kind of like flies above everything else right now. Is like if you just install the base Craft and you give it a simple article entry section type, like it is super easy for someone that's just going to be a content manager, that's not going to be developing on it, not going to be doing anything. They can look at that really fast and be like 5 seconds, have an entry done. But then itself, it's like they think about, okay, well then you start adding in plugin development on that. Like they open up basically the entire Vue framework. And I think a lot of the other ones, they kind of close everything off to that kind of like mentality of opening it up for a developer to not have to go in and hack really hard into the things. I think that that's a really big feature that I like having too. Is like, okay, I want to make sure that when I give it to like the client, that they don't look at me like, oh crap, I have no idea what to do with this. But at the same time, that doesn't limit myself to be able to go in and go just straight plugin development and start adding on tons of crazy stuff, but the client never sees that. I think like with WordPress, like they see everything that you're doing unless you really go in and start writing a bunch of stuff to allow them not to see specific things. Yeah. Expression does that pretty well too. Is like you can go in there and put a couple of users in there, and you can tell those users whatever they can access. They can not see view folders, anything like that. Whereas like Craft, I mean, they do. I think so far, I mean, I haven't really dug too much into the user side of that stuff yet, but it seems like they've thought about that. It's like the best of all the other frameworks, which I don't know what you guys think about it calling Craft a CMS. I'm kind of calling it more of like a CMSF. So it's like it is a system, but at the same time, like I haven't been able to look at Expression Engine. I really haven't. Maybe I used like Drupal once, right. But even WordPress, like going straight in and writing into the framework itself, it's been pretty easy. So I'm calling it a CMF. Even if Brandon Kelly and those guys don't like it, I'm gonna call it that. Max is quiet.
Just listening to you guys. Well, it seems like a lot of the tensions usually come when we try to stretch, a blogging system to a web application.
Yeah.
Just trying to turn, one into the other. That's where all the problems start. And so it seems to me that what's important is just to figure out a way to provide different, flexible system of all kinds of modules that can be also overridable easily, for the developer. Because it seems like all the WordPress websites and the owners of the WordPress websites, they still hire a developer to do some work. So that's not gonna stop, right? So just having a system that's flexible enough so that you can hire a developer and work that out quickly. That's what the goal is in the CMS, right?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I've had. There was one site where we were redeveloping but had to push a feature to that was Expression Engine. And Jake, you had talked about how Expression Engine does have the ability, just like WordPress, where you can set all these user roles, but it's really awkward to do. And then I went in Expression Engine, and I know the client came with us with the same idea. Was like we went in there and we were trying to add new stores for this liquor distributor. I went in there and Jake and I sat on a Google Hangout for about an hour, I think it was, of figuring out like where the heck was this content stored. And not only that, it wasn't good for a content manager because it's hard for them to see it, but it also exposed a lot that they could have screwed up. Luckily, kind of the file permissions were all set that it would eventually just error out, and you thought you did something and it didn't. But it wasn't very friendly for a developer who kind of knew what they were doing, and then at the same time, it wasn't friendly for a content manager. And like I said, there is ways to set up Expression Engine and a lot of CMSs so that you don't expose, like, oh, let's create a new content type and all these kind of GUI interfaces that change the way everything functions. But how do you feel about having, these GUI pages that let you install themes and plugins from the browser versus, all of us are relatively competent, it seems, in writing code, developing, pulling in something from a package manager like Composer or Bower or something else. Like, how do you guys feel of having those, install a plugin here and it takes a zip file, or even if it does Composer in the back end? Like, how does that make you feel?
In the context of the projects that I work in, it's completely unnecessary. I think they have their place, and they already exist to a certain extent on probably 50+ different platforms that are out there already. I think, certainly from my perspective, if I'm looking to add a feature onto a website, the absolute last thing I'm going to do is log on to the live administration area for that website, click install, and then cross my fingers and hope that it works. There'll be a process that I want to go through or have to go through because the contract deems it to be the case. So, I would be looking to install that locally, check out the configuration, make sure that it runs okay, probably push it to some sort of intermediary server, whether you call that staging or whatever, and then once we've signed that off, then that's going to go to live. So I think the idea of a sort of web GUI to a modern, large-scale kind of web development project is a unnecessary stroke useless step. I mean, I've got WordPress sites that I've got in a Git repo that are an absolute nightmare because the clients decided to update them on the live site. So my Git repo is behind the live site because they've updated the core or they've updated a plugin. It's just a nightmare.
Right.
Yeah, I don't like the idea behind like the way that like WordPress kind of does their theming type stuff. Whereas like you just can install and you expect that person to know all the type of data that needs to be on in that theme. Because once you just start going in there, especially if you're starting to do like if you're not writing your conditionals out on your views and stuff like that, stuff to just breaking it automatically. I like the idea of being able to choose a theme, but then inside of that theme, like it's really up to the developer. Actually, it should be up to the designer or the front end designer of that, kind of being able to build that however they want. But once you start getting into the fact that they control that, there's no point in having someone select something. It should just be that you're building into, maybe its own folder of, just theme. But actually having like some type of GUI where you select from multiple different types of themes. What'd be interesting is actually having something like that where you can, you can actually do little previews of each theme. But then it not. I don't know. I actually never really thought about theming because I'm kind of coming from the background of, well, I don't do WordPress, so I don't have to choose a specific theme. I'm just building into the views itself, and the application just uses those. I don't know.
I think for me as well, it's more than just the theme. The theme is only one aspect of the website. There's the content that needs to be there. There's some functionality that might need to be there. There's something that might need to be in a remote API. So it's not just a single, bunch of styles or a theme for a website. It's so much more than that. Implementing a new piece of functionality on a website is often a combination of the design or the theme or the layout, but also a new set of pages that have got to be added at the same time, or there could be 2 or 3 sort of factors that go into that new piece of functionality that you're adding to the website. So I think, trying to do everything in the theme, to sort of use that generic phrase, is potentially too much. It's more than that often.
I think one of the things that I've been seeing, at least from what I've seen, is there's a trend now to less themed CMSs. I know that Craft makes a pretty big deal about like not having themes, and that yes, you have plugins and you have content types that you might pull from a developer that they can do unit tests or whatever, but they're very proud of like not having a theme market and being like, you're gonna make your custom layouts of these things. A blog, I think the blog engine has something where if you pull it in, you can at least see the data. You can see, it's got a sample view that you can see, like here's your API hooks to get the blog post and all that. But once you go beyond that, it's going to give you kind of, it's going to make you build your own theme on top of it for that custom client that you're doing. Is that something that you guys all agree with? I personally do, but how do you guys kind of feel on that aspect of don't have a reusable theme marketplace as much as a plugin and content marketplace or package management system or something?
I think themes only work for blogs, and I think that's why it works for WordPress.
Yeah.
Because typically when you're outside, once you move outside of the idea of, okay, well now I'm going to start adding custom post types, that's where you really need to get away from the theme thing. Because if you're doing a blog, it's going to be on a blog. Typically, you're going to have you're going to have an article title, you're going to have this body content, maybe you're going to have a hero image. I get the idea of being able to do themes like that, but once you get out of, okay, well now I need to add a different types, a couple different things onto that type of blog post. It's more or less going back to, man, I always forget your name, man. Alex, there you go. Kind of we're going back to what Alex said is, you kind of, everything should be custom. Everything should be left up to the person that's actually coding out that template.
Yeah.
I say no themes.
No themes.
Yeah, I also feel kind of the same way because I don't switch my theme often on any of my websites. It's not like I switch it off, every week or something. I think the theme is just like it's just like a way to preview how the website will look, right? But then you also have to go through all of your pages and still do some tweaks, and some customizations. So it's a big topic. It depends, like if your website has a lot of content that's very unique, then you still need to develop that part of the theme anyway.
Right. I think one of the things that I also kind of going into the theme mentality, and Jesus, keep coming back to WordPress. And, I feel it seems like WordPress is just slightly off the ball in. This is not something I agree with, but so they base their entire content types on blog posts. A page is really just a single blog post found at a certain URL, if you really look at it. And then when you create custom content types, it's a WYSIWYG. So what they're really basing it on, and they're just off of saying, okay, all your content types are going to really be based on a WYSIWYG editor. And this is probably going to make Jake cringe because I know we've talked about it before. But I personally really, really, really hate WYSIWYG editors. So working with Wardrobe, we made pretty darn sure that you had like a Markdown editor, which is not always client-centric, I know. But it basically forces you to say, okay, we are the designers, we know what we're talking about, so when you want to build out your content, here are some hooks, here are some headers, here are some links, here's how photos are going to look, and if not, I hope you know some raw HTML to kind of change your styles up versus because I've even when using stuff like React or is it Reactor, that's like the big like $70 per client or whatever WYSIWYG editor, and it's still bad botches the layout every time I've seen it inserted.
I think the best implementation of that, and I don't know if you guys have seen it though, it's from Ghost. So theirs is not like a WYSIWYG editor; it's a Markdown editor. But like the one thing that I see lacking from Markdown editors for the most part is the whole idea of being able to upload images directly, especially on the client end of stuff. You know, they don't look at a Markdown editor unless they know Markdown. You know, okay, well, where do I need to upload this image to actually put that image tag like in the Markdown editor? Ghost does that amazingly. Like you just drag and drop images straight into the Markdown editor and it does it for you. Like when that gets implemented like that, I love stuff like that. I don't care too much about WYSIWYG editors. I don't know what you're talking about, Ryan. I think we talked about it once where I was like, man, WYSIWYG editors are killing me right now. But I think like it's when they're done. Like Redactor is actually the best one I've actually used because I implemented that on our CMS that we used for our site. But it was still, it didn't. I actually didn't use the updated version. I used the older version, which they didn't have. They didn't actually have the drag and drop for like images and stuff like that. And for people, typically all the people that have used the things that I've built, they're not people that don't know any dev stuff. So it's like all they know how to do is type their content they want, and they want to be able to just drag and drop images. So I think Ghost, which I wish I could use Ghost for other things for blogging because it's kind of nice, but I think they've nailed it on the head when it comes to the Markdown editor stuff.
Editors. Yeah. Does anyone know if that's something? I know the whole Ghost project is open source. Do you know if that is like a Bower package that you can grab? Because that would be really awesome.
You mean the Markdown editor itself?
Yeah, their editor. Because that would be really cool. Yeah, a lot of people are saying Ghost is awesome. One-trick pony. Unfortunately, very unfortunately.
They're talking about October CMS. I wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit because I looked at that this morning.
I was just going to mention one other thing on the WYSIWYGs actually, in that I think there's an aspect of it being a two-sided story. So there's the front end where the client is editing it, where it's important for them to feel like they can make text bold, upload an image, drag and drop it, add some links. But I think there's an important aspect which a lot of CMS systems overlook, which is that sometimes you actually need to do some processing on the HTML that's submitted. So it might be that you need to do some cleaning up and tidying up of what's actually posted through. You know, because obviously when somebody copies and pastes in a whole bunch of content, that comes in with all of its styles and line heights and margins and all of this, and then the client wonders why one page looks completely different to another page. So I think there is an aspect of enforcing a sort of rigidity around the content that's actually posted through and potentially doing some tidying up, which a behind the scenes, you know, scripting language like PHP is perfectly capable of stripping out a whole bunch of tags and styles and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. So
in an ideal world, it would be awesome if you could have a front end where the client felt like they were editing all their content, and in the back end you were storing nice clean Markdown.
Yeah, that would be really ideal. Eric, the core developer of Wardrobe CMS, makes a good point that drop down images inside of a text editor isn't a WYSIWYG feature as much as it is whatever editor you're implementing's feature. So I know with Wardrobe he kicked butt in making sure that there was a drag and drop editor. It's still, and I think this may be something he's working on 2.0, is that it shows up as Markdown, unfortunately. So it'll upload your image and then it'll show up as Markdown. I do think I've seen, Max, I think you worked with something like Sir Trevor where it's Markdown powered drag and drop, and then if you drop an image, it doesn't, it's like it'll store, it'll go ahead and store that as Markdown in the background, but it'll show your user like an image in the middle of their text or something.
Almost, yeah. It's yeah. Sir Trevor editor is more of like you have a bunch of different blocks of various content. You know, like let's say you have a piece of content that's just like text, then you have another one that's a video, another one that's an image, right? So it stores all of its information as JSON, and then you can just format that as HTML or as Markdown. And I had a live demo somewhere, but I think it's broken right now. So that's more for people who, you know, just they don't want to deal with Markdown. They want to edit text like they would on like a page, like in Microsoft Word, you know, add like a piece of content, and then go on from there. So that's a really cool idea for a CMS that's geared toward people that would have no idea how to write Markdown, because that's more for like developers, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Jumping conversations just a little bit, but I think there's kind of connecting this to what we were talking about earlier, which is how do we compare one CMS to another. I think that the sweet spot for us in terms of a lot of the CMS development or kind of decision making that we have is a combination of like 4 main pieces. So one of them is that it's like modern coding practices, so that we know that we can kind of continue to use it going forward versus monkey patching kind of like modern stuff onto an old thing. So it's less about what could I kind of maybe wrangle out of it, and more like what's the common framework we're starting from. So that's why we would definitely lean in the direction of like either a Laravel-based CMS or like a Craft or something like that. It's got to be easy for whoever's going to maintain it in the long term. So whether it's designers or it's developers or content editors, or we're going to hand it off to mom and pop shop and never see them ever again, like that's going to make influence on make sure that whoever's going to maintain it has what they need. It needs to save us from rewriting the same thing over and over again. So that's kind of the problem we run into when we're doing custom work. No matter how much reusable pieces of your CMSs you have. I mean, Max, I'm sure you know this. Like you've experienced this firsthand. When you do custom CMSs over and over again, there's just some things that you're not going to abstract because you just don't have time to spend all the time doing it. And so there's just some pieces you rewrite over and over and over again. Whereas somebody whose full-time job is writing a CMS, they are going to actually do the work to abstract those. And then the last one was a really, really excellent point that I forgot, so I'll let you guys know.
Yeah, so I think that kind of brings it to a really good point. So we were talking about making it reusable pieces, but making it very flexible. I can't remember if it was Matt or Max that was talking about kind of having these modules that you could swap in and out. I know that I'm about to finish up a project, hopefully, for a client, and they've got this CMS system in the back end that will change some we've got some news articles and a few different WYSIWYG content areas, and then we've got long list of areas where where are all their service locations, what is their current billing rates, where do we want the contact form to send, and all that kind of stuff is in this admin area. And then we had a kind of a customer portal login area, and that's one thing that I think is kind of tough with CMSs, because there's a lot of information you want to share. You don't want to have 4 different versions of jQuery up on your server because you've got a CMS one place where the admin area uses one version, your front end that you're actively developing on uses another, and then you've got a separate. That's what a lot of people have come up to me and they're like, oh, why don't we use a traditional CMS for the brochure page and managing the brochure pages, and then for this for the customer login area just go and slap together Laravel. But for me it's like, well, what happens when links change, or the layout needs to be changed, and it's how do you share layout? It wouldn't be really possible to share layouts with something where the CMS is completely taken out, except for having to write raw HTML for each one every time you want to make every change. So that's kind of one of the pain points that I've seen with CMSs, is it's hard to also build kind of a SaaS component to them, or swap out. Like you need a new auth system. I know that with the ad agency, one of the projects that I came in on, I did a little bit of front end development for it. They had completely changed the auth system from WordPress, and then there was like, oh, here's a security update, and they kind of just told the client that it was like, we've completely changed WordPress core so much that we'd have to rewrite it again because we can't just patch the security patch because we core hacked so much. And I don't know, someone that's worked with Craft, is it relatively built so that you can build stuff on the side of it with Yi without having to really monkey patch?
The plugins
change the
give you access. So they wrote everything internally, basically around the idea of using not external APIs like JSON APIs, REST APIs, but internal APIs, so well-defined interfaces with really modern, PHP, OOP classes written in Yi, and they're all interfaces talking to each other. And so the fact that they're limiting themselves internally to use these interfaces means that your plugins also have access to the same sets of things to do that without having to do all kinds of weird, hacky stuff. I'm going to paste a comment in the front-end chat. It's a speaker deck from my friend, the guy I mentioned, Anthony Colangelo. What they ended up doing actually was, I think lost someone. The idea of kind of writing these internal plugins that give you this external access to things is something they're still kind of, I think, figuring out the nuances of. And so that's kind of where Anthony and I are working to figure out what does it look like to get data out of a craft system. The infrastructure is there, but I think the practice and experience of people actually needing it much in the craft world is just not, it hasn't been proven out yet. But this thing I just linked is, so Anthony was working with MTV, and this speaker deck goes into much greater detail on it. But basically, MTV entered all their data into a craft site, and then they've got a Laravel site, a Redis site, a WordPress site, a couple others, and Laravel is kind of basically the hook that's bringing all these things together. And so what he did in that one, which we're hoping to make not be the case in the future, is he wrote an eloquent model, or a set of eloquent models that directly read the craft database tables. And he said, look, worst case scenario, if craft makes a breaking change, I make one change in my eloquent model, and the rest of my Laravel site's working fine. So the eloquent model is kind of like the interface between all the Laravel stuff and the craft stuff. Hopefully,
yeah, that's very cool.
You wouldn't even have to do that. Hopefully there's like a nice little API or whatever. But basically, that's why I fell in love so quickly with craft, because I didn't use it prior to a week ago. Because when you look at their internal code, it's really nicely defined interfaces in a very modern style that gives you the hope that, man, if I can hit those interfaces, I can trust that we're not going to have all these weird breaking changes because I'm not modifying core. So.
Mm-hmm. Now, so I don't know if it's Treya is talking about what we really need is something for the Joy developers to work with, as well as the end user to client use. It's hard to find or quantify this. There are a lot of solutions on the market that are either one or the other. I haven't really found one that's developer friendly. The thing that's the most developer friendly that I would say is probably just working off of Rails or Laravel. That's kind of the craziest. But kind of on the side of things, Max, you had talked about looking at is it Pongo or Pogo CMS?
Yeah, Pongo CMS. Mm-hmm.
That got me really excited until I saw that it was abandonware, because it was like, for me, it seemed like they started building like a tool set that you could use to build a CMS on the side. So it was like you can use a lot of the tools that you're familiar with the CMS portion of it. And then also, if you decided, oh, we're going to scrap the whole CMS, we're going to scrap Pongo, you unbundle Pongo, and it's off of your site forever, which I really liked because that's ultimately flexible for me. So, and it gives you, I think, kind of on the other side of that is giving you good tools to easily make really good UX would be awesome.
So somebody mentioned in comments, Josh, I think, about MailChimp and Stripe, how they're internally, they're focused on developers, but also they provide very good user experience. I definitely find that with MailChimp, it's really awesome how they have their, the newsletter editor is so advanced and has all kinds of blocks, of content, and it works really well even for, people that are not so savvy with all kinds of like the Markdown editors and all kinds of WYSIWYG. So,
right.
And that's where the Sir Trevor editor is basically the same thing as the MailChimp editor, where you can extend the blocks of the content, right? But then you can see that being all around the web, there's more and more websites that are just allow you to build like a single page website, and so then you just you drag and drop the content that you want, and in a lot of cases that's enough for small businesses and for some very specific websites, and I really love that idea as a content management system for just like one pages, So that's a neat feature.
Yeah, Ken's Market, just down the street. You heard of it? So there's no commute, like
Jake.
fast.
I'm back. Sorry, internet. You guys see me pop in for a second, and then I was like, oh.
So I think one of the other things that I've looked at is at work we've got a tool built by one of our senior developers that was basically I don't want to call it a CMS. It's now got CMS components, which now looking at it, I kind of went my own way and was like, I'm building very, very specific SaaS apps with very small amounts of brochure sites, if any. So I would always kind of roll from scratch. But so I wanted to get kind of your idea. I know we're running kind of at the end of the talk, but on a starter kit versus a CMS. I know that Max, you had sent something that kind of had CMS components, but it was basically a Laravel. It was a Laravel app that you cloned, and I've got a post that I'm currently writing about the good things and the bad things about those. But just wanted to get your ideas on it, kind of at the end of anything, and if there's any final questions in the chat, go ahead and post them, and we'll try to wrap up, and maybe schedule one again later.
So yeah, I posted a list of things. It's on my Twitter and also in the chat thread in the conversation. A list of the CMSs, and there are some like really nice starter kits, right? So there's I think let me see. There's one by David that's called Laravel Bootstrap, and so that's basically a starter kit for your own CMS. It has a good chunk of things already done for you, so it's pretty easy to start with. But then, of course, when you want to have a solution that's easily skinnable and you can have some plugins and stuff, that's out of the market right now for Laravel. So that's what we need to come together for and discuss more about that.
Yeah, and that's kind of been my vision is, have this package that you can kind of install. It's going to be very, very customizable, so you can say, here's where I want my admin area, if I want an admin area even, and then basically be able to say, define a block of content as a package or as a, namespace or whatever, do some configurations options, and then, it builds your admin nav system. It's going to give you some form builder stuff to make form building a lot easier, and then kind of does a little bit of magic around your data and massages your data to make at least the admin area really easy, and then have strong conventions so that, if you need to talk to something like a custom navigation bar builder, you can do that, and you can just plug and play kind of these modules of stuff, and that's kind of, I know that there's a gist that I've got this grand vision in my head that a lot of people have said is complicated, it would be cool, it would be not cool. That's kind of what spurred me to start this talk and start this conversation, is like, but I almost see it as more of a toolkit versus a CMS, because it's a toolkit of very, very customizable modules that you would kind of drop in, and then it would make hopefully CMSs, building proper, really good UX CMSs, a lot easier.
Can you post the link?
Yeah, I'll post the
link. While he's doing that, Max, have you actually used I don't know how to say his handle, but Daisy, have you used that Bootstrap? Because it looks a little bit like this kind of CMS that he's talking about.
Yeah, I've used the previous version of it, just to start with, it had really nice code, and now it's even better. It's really clean to start with. Yeah, it's a very good starter. I'm not sure I can use it for anything at this point. You know, as far as all kinds of custom build things, but for small clients, for small businesses, that would be really easy to, you know, to drop it in and just start working on it.
And which one was that?
It's by David Thorpe. It's Laravel Bootstrap. I can have a link.
Yeah, I see that now. Okay. I'll have to check that out a little bit more.
Yeah, I posted the first version of it. I mean, the link to the first version of it a long time ago, like probably like a year and a half ago, when it was with Laravel 3, and it was amazing. And nobody was talking about it yet, so I posted it on the forum, in Laravel forums, and the post just gone viral, like thousands of views in just a week or so.
Yeah, we didn't use the original in part because it's, for a lot of these things, especially, they're usually a single person kind of creating all of it, and what they do is I mean, of course, we all dog food it, right? They create what's going to be most useful for their particular use case. So to really commit to building something on top of one of these is a little scary until it's been proven out, where you see there's, you know, multiple contributors, issues actually being closed. I think that's one of the issues with a lot of these Laravel-based, whether it's a CMF or a CMS, a lot of them are so fresh. I mean, a couple months old. October looks really nice, but nobody's ever actually used it except for a few people who aren't speaking up. So it's like a lot of this is like, you know, man, it'd be really nice, especially the more enterprise you get, to have like the provenness of a Drupal. Like somebody mentioned Drupal 8. So Drupal 8's trying to combine all this like freshness with the kind of enterprise provenness, or like a Craft, where they've been doing it for a year and a half. But then we're like, yeah, but I want this. So I feel like, especially if this Laravel Bootstrap is more and more being like, hey, this is the one that people use. Like I feel like if people center in on one, and more people say, hey, that meets my needs, that's not some really quirky thing that only meets that one guy's needs, I think that'd be a space for, like, you know, for growth here.
Yeah, and he kind of goes with the same idea of, he's like, Laravel Bootstrap does not handle the front end of your site. I differ a little bit on that in saying that when you install like something like a blog module, it maybe should have a default or a sample view that doesn't take any of your templating or anything to mind. It just says, hey, you want to get this content on the page so you can show a client, or you can, you know, just make sure that the database is working, that the module is installed, and then, you know, if you go into this file and, you know, the view loader says, hey, you know, if I find a file over here, I'm going to use this as the template instead of that default. That'd be really cool, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of really wanted a Laravel-based CMS just because I've built a couple of, I guess, modules or custom functionality that I know I could utilize in other websites, and I wanted to be able to pull those across. And equally, I wanted to be able to pull in some composer packages. Let's say there's an API that I want to be able to build, then I want to be able to pull in an API package or whatever. So I've personally started developing yet another Laravel CMS, which you never know, it might become the one that everybody starts to go to, I don't know. But I've kind of deemed that to be the pages and media and URL and users are kind of core to it, because who wants a CMS where you can't manage pages, media, and URLs and content? And then I've tried to do everything else as sort of, you know, I don't know, a modern PHP kind of feel to them. So if you want to build a module, there's a module interface, and you've got a code to that. If you don't want to do it as a module for the CMS, then just stick it straight into your Laravel roots file and do it all through there. You know, that's what I wanted, the flexibility to be able to do stuff both in and out of a CMS framework. So I think that's on the list as well, but it's at the bottom and I'm a little way away from finishing it, but maybe if you want to take a look and chuck in some comments, that would be cool.
Yeah, that's all very good. So I guess that's been about an hour now that we've been broadcasting. So I think let's go ahead and wrap it up. If anyone wants to keep on putting questions in the comments, go ahead. I know I want to keep this conversation going as I keep dreaming on building something or working with someone with what they've got. So I guess let's keep the conversation going. We'll figure out. Hopefully the video will be up on YouTube after we stop the broadcast. I think that's how these are supposed to work. So yeah, if anyone's got any kind of wrapping comments, any plugging that they want to do.
Yeah, I think it'd be good to keep the conversation going. Maybe we can come up with some discussion points or maybe agendas for future hangouts, and we can all maybe come up with ideas around, I don't know, do one focused on what the front end guys want, do one focused on what the module developer guys want, do something focused on who the different stakeholders are in projects and what clients want to be able to do. It sounds to me like there's probably 3 or 4 more hangouts that could be had to discuss those different aspects, and maybe that would almost develop some sort of brief or spec of what we could actually be looking at requiring.
Definitely. If you guys can contribute to the, I'm gonna post it with the links to the CMSs that are stable and development. So that way we have a nice list of all the frameworks and all the CMSs out there.
Yeah, I'm hoping if we do this again, I'll have a much better level of understanding about some of the more creative things that we can do with Craft. Again, I'm like very excited, but very early in, and trying to do some digging, especially in this kind of space of like, we want some things that are very user friendly, but we want all of our flexibility. And we're on the space of being like, man, there's a lot of potential here. So I'm hoping in the future we're going to be there. If anybody has any input, I mean, like I said, Anthony did one thing, but there's probably other people who've done creative things with it. So if y'all have any feedback, and then hopefully we'll have more information next time we do something. So.
Yeah, and I'd almost even like some deep topics like pages. That's a pretty common function. So getting something like that working, or looking at blog posts, looking at different content types, different areas that CMSs kind of get challenged, and then also different roles, like Alex was saying, and almost set a topic that we're gonna cover and what would be ideal, so we can kind of keep fleshing out like what do we want in our mind's eye, and then we may find something where we do a deep dive and say, hey, let's work on Craft for a while, or let's play with this for a while, and then end up finding a really cool thing that works already. We end up building something based on the specs.
This is a good start. I think we should have a part 2.
Yeah, we should try and get some of the other guys from some of the other CMSs that are well known, kind of pull them in on the combos to kind of see, because those guys know their frameworks in and out, and see kind of like even them as their team, see where they feel like their CMS is hurting, and what they want to benefit from it, and where they could see that another CMS can fit in another product, like another niche on the market. Because most of those guys build their stuff for not, they really drill them down for one specific purpose. So I think it'd be interesting to see, pull them in on some of the chats and be like, okay, where do you guys see that you guys aren't doing something that other people can benefit from? I think that'd be really cool to do.
Yeah, I definitely would want to. Alex, you've already kind of got a small stake into the CMS market. I know that we're all kind of custom rolling our own things, but so it would, Jake, it would definitely be interesting if anyone ever, would pay attention to the night team views or whatever we're getting, and would want to jump in on this and have like a day where we talk with someone with Craft. You know, I would like to talk with I think it's with Drupal. I know A.V. Stevens is pretty active in that project. Get their idea of kind of the CMS side, because I know they've got a framework that is competing with Laravel, but also kind of where the CMS is going, the pain points with each CMS, so that people listening can also say, hey, I'm not having to build a customer login area, so Craft or something works for me, or whatever. To kind of go through what's good or bad with a single thing, but. Cool. I think that's about it, and we'll wrap this up.
Cool. Let's do it again.
Yeah, thanks for bringing us together, Ron.
Oh, no problem.
Thank you for the invite.
Discussion.
No
and
problem.
for all the questions and discussion. It's awesome.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you to the people in the chat. Hopefully we'll get QA if it's persisted. I'm going to play a little bit more with how Google Hangouts works and how this will post to YouTube. But thank you for the guys on the event page, because that definitely fed into our discussion. There were some things that I know I wanted to bring up, like October, that we just couldn't get to right now. So we definitely will.
Maybe next time once we chat, they'll have launched something.
What's up?
Maybe next time we chat, they'll have launched something.
Yeah, that would be really cool. Maybe we could bring them on as like kind of the launch. I know that there was something that I found in May. So if they're willing to hit the fire, maybe give us a glimpse. Maybe we'll sing praises, or we'll have questions. So that'd be
Laracon.
Cool. Yeah, if anyone's going to Laracon, a lot of us are.
This is a sore topic. I don't want to talk about Laracon.
If you guys are in chat and at Laracon, I know I'll be there. Matt and Maxime are also there. I don't know if Alex, if you're going, or if you're going to the EU.
I'm going to the EU one in August, so I'll be there. I think I'm going to be meeting Max at the Laravel London meetup in next week after. Yep.
Yeah, it's next week, next Thursday, I believe.
Yep. Maybe I'll try and show you a demonstration of my attempt at a Laravel CMS then.
Awesome. Love to see it.
And Max,
I'm looking forward to the next talk. It's gonna be good.
That sounds good, man.
Cool.
All right, guys. We'll let you know when the next one is scheduled, and just keep things. I guess the event page will keep going. Hopefully, we'll post it to the Laravel page, and maybe anything else that's relevant on Google Groups. I don't know how those work, so someone else will have to do that for me.
Sounds great.
All right.
Alrighty, guys. Bye.
You guys later.